Mary Whitmore, the dazzling face of Whitmore Enterprises, gripped the steering wheel of her sleek luxurious car with growing frustration. The countryside sprawled endlessly around her, green fields rolling into the horizon, interrupted only by the occasional barn or silo. She had planned this solo drive as a chance to escape the noise of her corporate world and breathe. Her empire of luxury car dealerships stretched across the globe, and she spent most of her days in boardrooms or extravagant galas, always surrounded by people but rarely truly seen. Yet here she was stranded. The engine of her prized car sputtered and died, and her heart sank as the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. She rolled to a stop on the side of the narrow, dusty road. Mary stepped out of the car, the soft crunch of gravel beneath her designer heels the only sound in the still evening air. A warm breeze tugged at her chestnut hair, but there was no comfort in it. She pulled her phone from her bag, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping impatiently at the screen. No service. Of course, Mary muttered, a bitter edge to her voice. She glanced back at her car, gleaming in the fading sunlight. It looked utterly out of place in this rural landscape, like a diamond tossed in the dirt. After pacing for a few minutes and trying futilely to restart the car, she resigned herself to seeking help. Grabbing her bag, she locked the car and began walking toward a small cluster of houses she'd noticed a few minutes earlier. The gravel road stretched before her, and as the sun dipped lower, the idyllic countryside began to feel more isolating. When Mary reached the settlement, she hesitated. It was quiet here, the kind of quiet she wasn't used to. A few chickens pecked at the dirt and a dog barked in the distance. People stared as she walked by, their eyes lingering on her polished appearance. Her tailored dress, expensive heels and gold earrings that caught the last light of the day. She didn't belong here and she felt it. "Excuse me," she called to a woman sweeping her front porch. The woman paused, resting her broom against her hip as she looked Mary up and down. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her tone wary but polite. "My car broke down," Mary explained, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Do you know if there's a mechanic nearby?" The woman nodded slowly. "Jason Carter. Runs a garage about half a mile down that road." She pointed toward a narrow gravel path. Mary's brow furrowed. "And he's competent?" The woman smirked, clearly amused by the question. "He's the only one we've got. If anyone can fix your car, it's him." Mary sighed. "Thank you," she said, though her tone lacked sincerity. As she turned to walk away, the woman called after her, "Don't let the looks of the place fool you." Mary followed the path, her heels clicking against the uneven ground. The garage came into view and her skepticism grew with every step. The place was a mess. Tools were scattered across workbenches and an old truck sat rusting under a tarp. The sign above the door read Carter's Garage, its paint peeling and edges warped. She stopped at the entrance, debating whether this was a mistake. Jason Carter stepped out from behind a car, wiping his hands on a rag. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair slightly roughed up from a long day of work. His grease-streaked shirt clung to him and his piercing blue eyes locked onto her. "You lost?" he asked, his voice even but with a hint of curiosity. Mary straightened her posture, her natural poise returning. "No. My car broke down." "Someone said you're the mechanic here?" Jason raised an eyebrow, glancing at her outfit and then back at her face. "What kind of car?" She replied with the nonne, her voice crisp. Jason let out a low whistle. "Fancy," he said, tossing the rag onto a nearby workbench. "Let's take a look." Mary hesitated. The garage wasn't exactly spotless, and she doubted he'd ever worked on a car like hers before. "Are you sure you can handle it?" she asked, her tone dripping with doubt. Jason smirked. "Lady, I've been fixing engines since I was old enough to hold a wrench. Bring it here and I'll let you know if I can handle it." She bit back a sharp reply and led him to where her car was parked. Jason circled the luxurious car, his gaze assessing. Then he popped the hood and got to work, his hands moving with practiced ease. Mary stood to the side watching him. He didn't seem fazed by the complexity of the car, muttering under his breath as he examined the engine. She noticed the way he worked, focused, precise and completely unbothered by her presence. It was refreshing in a way to meet someone who wasn't fawning over her or trying to impress her. After about 20 minutes, Jason straightened up and wiped his hands again. "Fuel pump issue," he said. "Shouldn't take more than a couple of hours to fix." "A couple of hours?" Mary repeated, her frustration boiling over. Don't you have better tools or something? This is a high-performance car, not some old truck. Jason chuckled, shaking his head. I know what it is. And I've got what I need. You want it fixed or not? She clenched her jaw but said nothing, crossing her arms and stepping back to let him work. As the minutes dragged on, the tension in her chest began to ease. There was something oddly calming about watching him, the way he moved with confidence and purpose. By the time Jason finished, the sun had fully set and the air was cool. He stepped back, closing the hood with a soft thud. All done, he said, brushing his hands on his jeans. Should run smooth now. Mary walked to the driver's side, opening the door and starting the engine. It purred to life and she felt a wave of relief. How much do I owe you? Jason named a price that was shockingly low compared to what she usually paid for such repairs. That's it, she asked, genuinely surprised. Yep, he replied, shrugging. She handed him the cash, hesitating for a moment. Thank you, she said, her tone softer now. Jason nodded, watching as she drove away, her car disappearing into the night. Mary's mind raced as she made her way back to the main road. Jason Carter was unlike anyone she'd ever met. He wasn't dazzled by her wealth or beauty, and he hadn't treated her like she was special. For the first time in years, someone had looked past the billionaire and seen her as just another person. And as much as she hated to admit it, Mary found herself wanting to see him again. Mary found herself unable to shake the memory of Jason Carter. Days passed, yet the image of the small-town mechanic with his confident demeanor and piercing blue eyes lingered in her thoughts. She told herself it was nothing more than curiosity, an anomaly in her otherwise predictable world. But deep down she knew there was more to it. To anyone else, returning to Jason's garage would have seemed absurd. But to Mary it felt almost necessary. Her life in the city, filled with high-end fashion, luxurious skyscrapers and yacht parties, suddenly felt suffocating. For once she wanted something real. She needed an excuse to go back. The following week, Mary slipped behind the wheel of her luxurious car and drove toward Jason's town. She told herself it was just to check on the repairs. After all, the car had been running perfectly fine since he worked on it. But as she pulled up to Carter's garage, she felt an uncharacteristic nervousness creep in. Jason was outside, wiping down the hood of an old pickup truck. His grease-stained shirt clung to his frame, and his hair was even messier than the last time. When he saw her car pull up, his brow furrowed, a mix of surprise and suspicion crossing his face. Back so soon? He asked, setting the rag down and walking toward her car. Mary stepped out, smoothing her dress. The engine's making a noise, she said, her voice steady. Jason gave her a skeptical look. Is it? Or are you just bored? Mary's cheeks flushed. I don't know what you're implying. Can you check it or not? Jason smirked, his amusement clear, but he didn't press further. Pop the hood, he said, grabbing his tools. As Jason worked, Mary wandered around the garage, pretending to inspect things. In truth, she was stealing glances at him. His steady hands, the way his brows furrowed in concentration. The simplicity of his life fascinated her. There were no designer suits, no pretense, just raw honesty in everything he did. Nothing wrong with your car, Jason announced after a few minutes, snapping her out of her thoughts. Engine's running smooth as butter. Mary shrugged, feigning indifference. Maybe I was imagining it. Jason leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. So what's the real reason you're here? Caught off guard, Mary hesitated. She wasn't used to people questioning her motives so directly. I just thought I'd check on the car. And maybe see how you were doing. Jason raised an eyebrow. You drove all the way out here for that? Mary sighed, feeling the walls around her facade crack. Fine. Maybe I wanted a break from the city. Is that so hard to believe? Jason studied her for a moment, then nodded. Not hard to believe at all. City life isn't for everyone. It's all I've ever known, Mary admitted, surprising even herself with the honesty. Well, Jason said, motioning toward an old wooden bench outside the garage. Have a seat. I've got some time. The two sat together as the sun dipped low on the horizon, bathing the garage in a warm, golden glow. They began to talk, first about cars, then about life. Mary found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in years. She told Jason about the pressures of running an empire, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who only wanted her for her wealth. Jason listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. Sounds like you've got everything but the things that matter most, he said finally. Mary frowned. What do you mean? Real connections, Jason said simply. People who care about you, not your money. Sounds like you're missing that. Mary was taken aback. No one had ever spoken to her so plainly before. She didn't know whether to be offended or grateful. What about you? She asked, shifting the focus. What's your story? Jason hesitated, but Mary's genuine curiosity seemed to disarm him. He told her about his father who had built the garage from scratch, and how he'd inherited it after his father's passing. Business had been tough, but he refused to give up on the dream his father had worked so hard to create. I could expand, maybe get some new equipment, Jason said, running a hand through his hair. But money's tight and I'm not about to sell my soul to some investor. Mary admired his resolve, though she couldn't imagine living with such limitations. Why not? With the right investor you could make this place bigger, better. Jason shook his head. And lose what makes it mine? No thanks. I'd rather keep it small and honest. Their conversation stretched into the evening, the air growing cooler as the stars appeared one by one. Mary felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. As she drove back to the city that night, her thoughts were consumed by Jason. He was nothing like the men she was used to, smooth-talking businessmen with polished smiles and empty words. Jason was real, unpretentious, and fiercely independent. Over the next few weeks, Mary found herself returning to Jason's garage more frequently, often with flimsy excuses about minor issues with her car. At first, Jason seemed skeptical, but as time went on, he began to welcome her presence. They worked side by side in the garage, Mary occasionally lending a hand despite her lack of experience. Their bond grew slowly but surely, rooted in their shared passion for cars and the honesty of their conversations. Jason began to see past Mary's polished exterior, discovering the kind-hearted, vulnerable woman beneath. And Mary began to appreciate the simplicity of Jason's world, the quiet evenings, the hard work, and the genuine connections he had with the people around him. But Jason couldn't ignore the nagging doubts in the back of his mind. Mary's life was so far removed from his own. Her world was one of luxury and excess, while his was one of grit and perseverance. He couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong in her world, no matter how much he enjoyed her company. And though Mary wasn't ready to admit it, she was beginning to fall for Jason. Over the next month, Mary and Jason's interactions became a steady rhythm, a routine neither of them admitted they looked forward to but couldn't seem to break. Mary had fallen into the habit of bringing her luxurious car to Jason's garage under increasingly flimsy pretenses. A slight rattle that disappeared after a few miles, a suspicious sound that Jason could never replicate. Each time Jason would smirk and say, "You're back already?" The small-town mechanic had become a strange but comforting presence in Mary's life. His garage, with its messy workbenches and the faint smell of oil and rubber, felt like a refuge from the cold, sterile world of boardrooms and luxury. Jason, on the other hand, couldn't quite understand why Mary kept returning. He wasn't naive. He knew she didn't need his help as often as she claimed. But he also couldn't deny that he enjoyed her company. There was something disarming about her when she wasn't wearing the mask of a billionaire. She was curious, witty, and much to his surprise, she didn't shy away from getting her hands dirty. One afternoon, as Mary sat on a stool in the garage watching Jason work on a vintage motorcycle, she broke the silence. "Do you ever think about expanding your business?" she asked, her voice casual. Jason didn't look up from the engine he was tinkering with. "Not really," he said. "Why not? You could open a second location, hire more people, make more money." Jason straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "And lose what makes this place special? No thanks. I'd rather keep it simple." Mary frowned. "You always say that. But don't you ever want more? A bigger shop, better tools, more opportunities." Jason turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Mary, more isn't always better. You of all people should know that." The words stung, but Mary didn't respond. She knew Jason wasn't trying to hurt her, but his statement hit closer to the truth than she wanted to admit. Her life was filled with more money, more success, more luxury, but none of it made her truly happy. Changing the subject, she stood and walked over to him. "Let me help," she said, motioning to the motorcycle. Jason raised an eyebrow. "You want to help? Why not? Show me what to do." With a shrug, Jason handed her a wrench and began explaining how to tighten a bolt. Mary listened intently, her manicured fingers fumbling slightly as she tried to follow his instructions. Jason watched her with a small smile, impressed by her determination. "You're a quick learner," he said after a few minutes. Mary beamed. "Thanks. Maybe I'll open my own garage someday." Jason chuckled. "I'll believe that when I see it." Their laughter echoed through the garage, the sound warm and unguarded. For a moment, it felt as though the vast differences between their worlds didn't matter. But the illusion didn't last. As their bond deepened, Jason began to wrestle with his growing feelings for Mary. She was unlike anyone he'd ever met, smart, kind, and surprisingly down-to-earth despite her wealth. But he couldn't ignore the chasm between their lives. She belonged to a world of sky-high buildings and private yachts, while he was just a small-town mechanic trying to make ends meet. Jason's doubts came to a head one evening when Mary invited him to dinner. "Dinner?" he repeated, leaning against a workbench. "Yes, dinner," Mary said, crossing her arms. "It's just a meal, Jason. Don't overthink it." Jason hesitated. "Where?" "There's a nice restaurant in the city I think you'll like." Jason shook his head. "Mary, I don't belong in places like that." Mary's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," Jason said, his tone firm. "I'm not like the people you're used to. I don't wear expensive suits or drive fancy cars. I'm not polished." Mary stepped closer, her voice softening. "Jason, I don't care about any of that." "Maybe you don't," Jason said, his eyes meeting hers. "But your world does. And I'm not sure I fit into it." The tension between them was palpable, and for the first time, Mary felt a pang of fear. She didn't want to lose him, but she didn't know how to bridge the gap between their lives. In an attempt to ease the growing strain, Mary decided to spend more time in Jason's world. She began visiting the garage more frequently, not just to watch him work but to help. She swept the floors, organized tools, and even started learning basic repairs. The townspeople took notice, and while some were amused by the sight of the glamorous billionaire in overalls, others were genuinely impressed by her willingness to adapt. Mary also started experiencing the simple joys of small-town life. She attended a local barbecue where she laughed and danced under the stars, and she spent quiet evenings sitting on the porch of Jason's modest home, talking about everything and nothing. Jason, too, found himself drawn to Mary in ways he hadn't expected. He admired her resilience, her curiosity, and the way she embraced his world without pretense. But his doubts lingered, gnawing at the edges of his happiness. Those doubts turned into conflict when Mary, without Jason's knowledge, began secretly helping his garage. She sent clients his way through a fake charity program, ensuring a steady flow of work. She also purchased new tools and equipment, delivering them anonymously. Mary's intentions were pure. She wanted to support Jason and help him succeed, but she underestimated how fiercely independent he was. When Jason discovered the truth, he was furious. "You think I can't take care of myself?" he demanded, his voice rising. "That's not what I meant." Mary protested. "I just wanted to help you." "I don't need your help, Mary," Jason said, his tone cold. "I don't need your money or your pity. I've built this place with my own two hands, and I'm not about to let anyone take that away from me. Not even you." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "Jason, I wasn't trying to take anything away from you. I just wanted to make things easier." Jason shook his head. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't your world. You can't just throw money at a problem and make it go away." The words cut deep, and Mary felt her heart break. She turned and walked away, leaving Jason standing alone in the garage. As she drove back to the city, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She had tried so hard to bridge the gap between their lives, but it seemed like every step she took only pushed Jason further away. And Jason, watching her taillights disappear into the night, couldn't help but wonder if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The days after their argument were heavy with silence. Mary didn't return to the garage and Jason didn't reach out. Both were consumed by their own thoughts, their worlds feeling emptier without each other. For Mary, the separation was unbearable. She had tried to do something kind, something meaningful, only for it to backfire in the worst way. She couldn't stop replaying Jason's words in her mind. "This isn't your world." But wasn't it? Mary had tried to fit into Jason's world, to understand it, to embrace it. Yet no matter what she did, the gap between them seemed insurmountable. Jason, meanwhile, buried himself in work. He told himself he didn't need Mary, that his life was fine before she came along. But deep down he knew he was lying. The garage felt quieter without her laughter, and the days seemed longer without her presence. Still, his pride wouldn't let him reach out. The distance between them only grew wider when Ryan Hartman, Mary's biggest business rival, caught wind of her connection to Jason. Ryan had always envied Mary's success, and he saw an opportunity to strike. If he could paint Jason as a gold digger or someone using Mary for her wealth, he could tarnish her reputation and shake her empire. Ryan wasted no time. He sent an investigator to dig into Jason's life, searching for anything that could be twisted into scandal. When the investigator found out about the anonymous donations Mary had made to Jason's garage, Ryan's plan fell into place. Soon rumors began to spread. Articles appeared online, claiming Jason was nothing more than a small-town mechanic riding on Mary's coattails. Some accused him of manipulating her, while others suggested he was secretly running her business into the ground. Jason's garage quickly felt the impact. Customers stopped coming, afraid of being associated with the growing controversy. Local suppliers began pulling their support, not wanting to risk their reputations. Jason was blindsided. He had no idea where the rumors had come from or why they were spreading so quickly. All he knew was that his garage, the legacy his father had left him, was falling apart. Mary found out about the situation from her assistant, who showed her one of the headlines. "Billionaire's boy toy. Small-town mechanic exposed." The article was filled with lies and half-truths, all designed to make Jason look bad. Mary's heart sank. She knew this had Ryan's fingerprints all over it. Without hesitation, Mary canceled all her meetings and drove to Jason's garage. She found him sitting on the porch of his house, staring at the empty lot where customers used to park. "Jason," she called softly as she stepped out of her car. He looked up, his expression hard. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," Mary said, walking toward him. Jason stood, his posture tense. "Talk about what?" "How you've ruined my life." Mary flinched. "I didn't do this. It's Ryan. He's trying to hurt me and he's using you to do it." Jason's eyes narrowed. "And why would Ryan even know who I am?" "Oh, that's right, because you couldn't leave well enough alone. You had to throw your money around, make everything better. Now I'm paying the price for your charity." "That's not fair," Mary said, her voice trembling. "I was trying to help you." "Well, maybe I didn't need your help," Jason snapped. "Did you ever think about that? Or did you just assume you knew what was best for me?" Tears filled Mary's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I didn't ask for any of this, Jason. I didn't ask to feel this way about you. But I do. And I'm not going to let Ryan destroy everything just because you're too stubborn to accept that I care about you." Jason's anger faltered at her words, but he didn't respond. "I'm going to fix this," Mary continued, her voice firm. "I don't care what it takes. I'm going to clear your name and expose Ryan for the liar he is. And when this is over, you can decide if you still want me in your life." Without waiting for a response, Mary turned and walked back to her car. Jason watched her go, his chest tight with conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to believe her, to let her fight for him. But another part of him, his pride, his fear, kept him rooted in place. Back in the city, Mary launched into action. She hired a team of investigators to gather evidence against Ryan. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Ryan was a master manipulator, always careful to cover his tracks. But Mary wasn't one to back down from a challenge. Days turned into weeks as Mary worked tirelessly, juggling her business responsibilities while orchestrating a plan to bring Ryan down. Her investigators uncovered emails, phone calls, and financial records that linked Ryan to the rumors about Jason. They also discovered Ryan had paid several journalists to write defamatory articles, offering them hefty sums in exchange for their cooperation. Mary's big break came when one of Ryan's former employees agreed to testify against him, providing key evidence that proved Ryan had orchestrated the smear campaign. But Mary's fight wasn't without sacrifice. One of her biggest deals of the year, a partnership that would have expanded her empire, was on the line. She had to choose between finalizing the deal or using the leverage she had gained to expose Ryan. Without hesitation, Mary chose Jason. In a press conference, she presented the evidence against Ryan, revealing his lies and manipulations. The scandal rocked the business world, and Ryan's reputation was left in tatters. Back in the small town, Jason watched the press conference on TV, his heart swelling with a mix of admiration and guilt. Mary had risked everything for him and he had pushed her away. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jason climbed into his truck and drove to Mary's penthouse in the city. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise. "Jason," she said, her voice soft. He stepped inside, his expression earnest. "I was wrong," he said, his voice steady. "I was too proud to see that you were just trying to help me. And I'm sorry." Mary's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of relief. Jason took her hands in his. "I don't care about the differences between our worlds. All I know is that I don't want to lose you." Mary smiled, her heart full. "You won't," she said. As they stood together, the weight of their struggles began to lift. They had faced betrayal, doubt, and the challenges of their different worlds, but their love had endured. The days following Jason's apology marked the beginning of a new chapter for him and Mary. Though they had reconciled, both knew they had a long way to go in rebuilding trust and fully merging their lives. But this time they were determined to face the challenges together. Jason returned to his garage to find a surprising sight. A handful of his former customers were waiting outside, offering their support. Word of Mary's press conference had spread, and people now understood the truth behind the rumors. The community rallied around Jason, offering him business and helping him recover from the damage Ryan's lies had caused. Mary visited Jason's garage more often, but not just as an excuse to see him. She worked alongside him, sweeping floors, assisting with repairs, and chatting with customers. It wasn't just about helping Jason rebuild his business. It was about showing him that she was willing to be part of his world, no matter how different it was from her own. Jason, too, began to take small steps into Mary's world. At first he was hesitant. The skyscrapers and luxury of the city felt overwhelming and alien. But Mary guided him with patience, introducing him to her friends and colleagues, showing him the world of high-stakes deals and glittering events. One evening, as they stood on the deck of Mary's yacht, Jason looked out at the city skyline, a glass of wine in his hand. "I never thought I'd be here," he said, his voice soft. Mary leaned against the railing beside him, her hand brushing his. "Neither did I," she admitted. "But I'm glad you are." Jason turned to her, his gaze steady. "I don't want to lose myself in all this," he said. "I don't want to forget who I am." Mary reached for his hand, holding it tightly. "You won't. And I won't let you. Jason, I love you for who you are, for your strength, your honesty, your heart. I don't want you to change." Her words eased the tension in Jason's chest. He smiled, pulling her into his arms. "I love you too," he said, the words carrying a weight he had been holding for too long. With their relationship stronger than ever, Mary and Jason decided to take on a joint project, renovating the garage together. Using her resources and his expertise, they transformed the small-town shop into a state-of-the-art facility that still retained its charm. They named the new garage Phoenix Motors, symbolizing how it had risen from the ashes of hardship. The garage became a hub for the community, attracting clients from nearby towns and even the city. Mary's connections brought in luxury car owners looking for personalized care, while Jason's reputation as a skilled and honest mechanic ensured they kept coming back. But the garage wasn't just a business. It was a place where Mary and Jason built their future. Together they worked late into the night, sharing laughter and stories over cups of coffee. Of course, their journey wasn't without its difficulties. Mary's board of directors wasn't thrilled about her relationship with Jason, arguing that it could tarnish her image. Jason, too, faced criticism from those who thought he was using Mary for her wealth. But Mary and Jason stood firm. They faced every obstacle as a team, proving to the world, and to themselves, that their love was genuine. One night, as they sat on the porch of Jason's home, Mary looked at him with a mischievous smile. "What?" Jason asked, raising an eyebrow. Mary held up a small, grease-stained notebook. "I've been keeping track of every repair I've helped with," she said proudly. Jason laughed, pulling her close. "You're getting better," he admitted. "But don't quit your day job just yet." They both laughed, the sound carrying into the night. Months turned into years and Mary and Jason's love only deepened. They learned to balance their worlds, supporting each other's dreams while staying true to themselves. Mary's business empire continued to thrive, and Jason's garage became one of the most respected in the region. Together they built a life that blended the best of both worlds. A life filled with love, laughter, and a shared passion for cars. As they stood outside Phoenix Motors one evening, Watching the sun set over the hills, Jason slipped an arm around Mary's waist. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Mary asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "For believing in me," Jason said. "For fighting for us." Mary smiled, her heart full. "I'd do it all over again," she said.